introduced. So why don't we start with Jennifer here. Jennifer Mitchell is joining us here from PA. Jennifer, I'd love to introduce you to everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I have been a elementary teacher and spent a good deal in the primary grades. I also was a building level principal, elementary leveled, and then I moved into a curriculum director role. And I'm currently the assistant superintendent at the Hollidaysburg area school district here in Pennsylvania.
So welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Lisa DiGaudio, and I am a director of curriculum and instruction for 2 charter schools that serve high school dropouts in Brooklyn and Queens. I started my career as a high school social studies teacher and then moved into administration and curriculum in elementary school, and then moved to high school, where now I founded both schools. I was founding principal in Brooklyn and the founding principal in Queens, and now I manage the curriculum and training for both. So I'm really excited to be here to share some insights with all of you, and learning, of course, too.
Excited to have you, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I am Tiffany Ferreira. I work at the Regis School, which is located in Houston, Texas. And currently I wear 2 hats. I'm a kindergarten teacher. This is my 9th year in kindergarten, and I am the curriculum development liaison for my campus. So that is how I am involved with Chalk. And our school is a small private independent school here in Texas.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Hummel. I am currently principal of grades 6, 7, and 8 in the Mount Union Area School District. It's a small rural district in the center part of Pennsylvania. Prior to that position, I was curriculum director for our district. And I was the first curriculum director that our district appointed in quite some time. So I was fortunate enough to find Chalk early on.
Fantastic. Welcome, Mike. And then we have lastly, Kathy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Gavin. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Lawn-Howntown District 123. Lawn and Hometown are southwest suburbs of the city of Chicago in Illinois. It's good to be with everyone this afternoon. I spent the first 26 years of my career at the high school level, and Lawn-Howntown 123 is an actual K through 8 elementary district. So for the last 5 years, I've had the privilege to serve at the elementary level. So I really feel like I've come full circle in my career. And actually, this is the grammar school that I graduated from a long time ago. So it's good to be with everyone. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. We're super, super excited to have this conversation. We see people here coming in from Jada, England, Minnesota. Incredible, just incredible, the amount of people who are just saying hello to all the panelists. I know, we've had conversations with Dr. Heidi Hayes-Jacobs, and we've talked a lot about her pedagogical approach on how to create maybe essential questions, how to build some formats around curriculum mapping. But I think we need to understand a little bit about why curriculum map, why is it important for our schools? And I'd love to kind of pick, maybe to start off with Mike, your brain around why curriculum mapping is something that your school went forward with, and why is it important for your school?
As I said previously, my district is rural and our resources and budget is limited. What we decided was, in terms of state testing and assessment, we weren't performing in a competitive manner in comparison to those districts in Pennsylvania that shared our same demographics. And so with the introduction of a new superintendent, she felt that curriculum needed to be a priority in our district, and so was willing to take steps to promote that and to put that at the forefront of our minds. What I will say is Jen Mitchell, who's on our panel, is the one that actually really sold us on Chalk. At the time, she worked in a neighboring county-wide district. And so when I was first introduced to Chalk, her district was using it. And with a lot of success and encouragement from them, it was something that we felt that we could do even in small steps. Prior to that, we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, and we had the data to support that was no longer an effective way to meet the needs of all of our learners.
For sure. I love the analogy, flying on the seat of pants. I think that's something possibly everyone will take away from our conversation today. But I know, Lisa, you have a very unique sort of setup in your charter school. Why was curriculum mapping maybe important for your school, and how did you go about that?
So our school, we're technically called transfer high schools, which is a term used in New York City for the DOE there. What that means is that we serve all students that are overaged and undercredited. So our ninth graders are like 19 years old, in some cases 20 years old. So far different group than a 13-year-old that would be in ninth grade typically. And so what that meant was that our curriculum really needed to be a little different in terms of meeting students where they were, because you would imagine coming in at that age, there's significant gaps of learning because of truancy and a myriad of other reasons. And so for us, being able to have a very consistent map that we would be able to go back to and make changes from semester to semester, because it's basically like creating a brand new school every semester. We graduate a very strong core amount of students, and then another group come in and get ready to graduate. So we usually liken this as like, we have like a 3 Super Bowl year, January, June, and August, because that's when our Regents exams are, and that dictates which students are going to be able to graduate. And in that case, we have new students that replace them, and then we're basically restarting again, and that's a lot of culture building and relationship building, which is heavily tied into our curriculum. And so having a single map system where we can go in and make those changes right on the ground and know that this story didn't work. Like, for example, this semester in one of the ELA courses, they spent really a lot of time on vaccines and used Tuskegee and a couple of other sources, and kids were like kind of very tired of the issue and wanted a break. And so, we're going to make a shift now for the summer group that we won't be repeating that unit. We'll be doing something else that uses the same skills, but with different literature, so that we can kind of reconnect them and listen and make those changes on the ground. So that was hugely important for us.
Gotcha. I know, Lisa, you just mentioned a big part around mapping is the idea of school culture, and curriculum mapping is actually a change management project. And a lot of school districts and school leaders, maybe they don't recognize that it does take a long time to get everyone on board. I know, Kathy, this is something that you dealt with. You had a very methodical approach around mapping. How did you go about changing that school culture and environment and go about the change management project that is curriculum?
Sure. I think it's really important to start with that vision and communicate the vision of why this is important. And just piggybacking on some of my colleagues here, I think this pandemic has really highlighted the need to have a written curriculum, and Chalk has been a great tool that we can house that written curriculum. I know we had staff members during the pandemic that were reassigned to classroom roles that have been traditionally interventionists. So having that clear roadmap for how to teach, for example, third grade when they haven't been in the classroom for years has been extremely helpful. But when I came to the district here 5 years ago, there wasn't a written curriculum. So we began with, communicating the why for why this is important. And so we began with a curriculum council. We established a curriculum council that was made up of administrators, teachers, board members. We wanted to make certain that we had representation from all grade levels, regular ed, special ed, and EL. And we developed right at the beginning a curriculum revision cycle. So we identified which curricular areas we wanted to attack first to build a written curriculum. And so we started with K-5 ELA. And then most recently, we've completed K-8 science. And this year we're working on K-8 social studies. So when we go about working on a particular curricular area, we assemble a curriculum committee. And again, we try to get representation from all of the schools in our district. A lot of the work is done either after school or over the summer. And I think it's really important, as Dr. Jacobs mentioned in the last couple of webinars, that you really take a slow and methodical approach to understanding the standards that are aligned to that curricular area and unpacking those standards. I think a lot of times staff members are eager to jump to the curricular resources and the activities, but I think a good amount of time to really unpack those standards and operationalize them for your particular district is critical.
Wow. Okay. First of all, I've never heard in a lot of schools, they don't go about curriculum councils in such an in-depth manner. Jennifer, I know because you've worked at 2 different districts and now you're at your second district, Hollidaysburg, you're implementing curriculum again. Is this the sort of approach that you took around change management and school culture, similar to Kathy, or what was some of the similarities or differences on your end?
Yeah, so I do believe that, high quality curriculum just doesn't appear by just assigning the work to teachers. And it cannot be siloed. It cannot just be this place that curriculum lives. It can't just be with the curriculum director either. It's a process that I think everyone has to embrace and understand. So it really does become part of your school culture. It's important that everyone knows that this is shared work. And when you talk about change process, we think about first order change and second order change. And by first order, I mean, you keep doing more or less the same thing, but you're just simply refining your work. Second order being you're really having a fundamental shift in your thinking and changing your behavior. You might think you're revising curriculum. So you might think, well, that's a first order change. But curriculum work is really not a first order change. It's a second order change. You are having people change their beliefs, change their thinking about how we do the work. And so you really have to be very careful and methodical about how you plan that out and how you involve folks to do that. I think that there's a lot of professional development around that has to happen prior to beginning any work of creating those maps. So for example, common vocabulary. First and foremost, what is curriculum? In conversations that I've had in both of my districts, and when I've asked, what's your curriculum? What do you use to teach? I will oftentimes get what Kathy referred to as the resource. They think our resource is that curriculum. So it's really important that everyone has a shared understanding of some of this vocabulary. Why do we map? How do we plan to use our maps? So there's a lot of foundational work that you really have to do. And as Kathy also said, it's about that shared vision of why we would choose to map and how will that process be.
Gotcha. No, and having a shared vocabulary, I'm just curious about, do you have maybe an example of, how long that process really took at your school to really develop that within the teachers, or maybe an example of a belief some teachers had at your school district around curriculum mapping and how you went about kind of tackling that belief and changing it?
Sure. I had a group of science teachers I was working with, and before we started the work, and we used that because we selected that as a data point in a middle level science team that we wanted to work on those curriculum maps. We felt there was a need there, very much like Mike talked about. The data showed the need there. So I pulled the science team together and began just with an article talking about what is curriculum mapping and why would we even want to do it. We also then began to dig into the standards and talk about what are the standards and what do they mean to us and do we understand them. And near the end of the first day of spending that with the science team, one of the science teachers said to me, "Really? I thought you brought me here to do curriculum writing. We haven't written anything." And I said, "You're right, we haven't, because there's a lot of things we need to do first and foremost to all get on the same page and understand so we can create high quality work together." So again, I think that's just really planning and thinking about the work and really setting those steps in motion, like I said, before you actually start even writing.
For sure. So with the writing process, structure obviously is very important. And Tiffany, you unmuted. Did you want to say something?
I was about to interject. Yeah, if you don't mind,
Go
just
ahead.
what they touched on really ring some bells for me, because I feel like our campus jumped in feet first with chalk, and we love that we did that because we got our toes wet for sure. But as we started diary mapping, it became apparent to us that we don't really have a long range plan for what this is going to look like on our campus. We knew we were committing to chalk for at least the next several years, if not indefinitely. And so one of the things that we're going to do on our campus this summer is create a curriculum management plan. So we'll align that with what the profile of the graduate is at our campus. And we'll kind of create guidelines for the words that we're going to use are tightly held and loosely held. What is something that we believe can't be skipped over or can't be negotiated, or your non-negotiables really, and then your loosely held. What are things that teachers have discretion over? And then that way we kind of streamline how our curriculum is going to change and develop over the next coming years. If we want something to go away, does it fall in line with our graduate? Does it fall in line with what our school believes is important? We are also religiously affiliated, so that comes into play there as well. So that was one thing that came out of our first year. Let's make a plan. Let's publish it. Let's have everybody have a piece of the responsibility pie. Like Jennifer mentioned, it's everybody in. It doesn't just fall on one person's shoulders. So that is going to be helpful for us moving forward.
I could jump in really quick too on the graduation profile, because that's something that we've actually started as well with sort of like a side grant that we were on, and especially for our students, because not all of our students are college bound. So having an employability profile for every graduate was super important. So that's been starting to get embedded as the next set of work that we're doing over the summer as well, and also including social, emotional, and diversity standards, so that we're making those connections and really hitting the relationship building from that standpoint as well.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things actually I was going to ask Tiffany is that profile of grad. I'm so glad, Lisa, you sort of jumped in there. Another thing, Tiffany, you had mentioned long range planning. Has anyone in the panel sort of gone about that process or is working through that? And maybe if you have something to share or add to that, and maybe that would help the attendees here, maybe even Tiffany think about it too.
I think for our district, what's been helpful is that curriculum revision cycle. And the curriculum council meets about 5 times a year. And we look at and use data to help us identify, which curricular areas do we need to target, and why do we prioritize those areas over others. So I think that's, have been really helpful in developing a long range plan. And, I think it's a lot of work when we talk about revising a curricular area, as we all know, because it's, we also need to consider the assessments and instructional strategies and resources that go along with, the written curriculum and the goals and objectives that we're hoping our students will walk away our classes knowing and being able to do.
And the shifts to standards as well has really been a part of that long range planning for us, because we've had, when I opened the Brooklyn school, myself and the founding executive director, we had just started Common Core. So we just did the shift immediately. And then when we opened the Queens school, we knew that we were going to have to get a better curriculum mapping system in and come chalk. And we're starting with next generation learning standards here in New York. And then, of course, with COVID, we've had to make some real significant shifts because of the assessment piece. And while, we've been dealing with no regents exams and things, our authorizers have put additional stress on us in terms of accountability. So while we don't have regents, we still have to have a very dynamic assessment plan that has really been measuring student growth and anticipating any kind of learning gaps over the course of the year, as we've been dealing with COVID and students have been in and out and either on remote or sometimes coming. So, there's all of that maneuvering too. So that's all been a part of that. And now that we're coming back to hopefully regular time, now we're coming back into more traditional measures. What is that going to look like? And how do we keep going with the things that have worked really well over the last year and a half for us too?
I was just going to add to that I think both of the districts that I've worked in, we started with curriculum, what we called a curriculum audit. So we looked at and created, and it was kind of interesting because everyone runs in all directions trying to find the binder, the flash drive, the place it was last saved. And we put dates to it. We said, when was this particular curriculum revised? And we kind of looked at what was the oldest, what was the newest. Interestingly, always what we test, we normally update that curriculum. But what we were finding out is some of these things that are very, very important to students who maybe aren't college bound, those courses needed attention too. So some of our business classes and some of the STEM related courses that we had really needed attention. So really kind of putting it all out there and looking at the dates and really thinking about what's the timeline for these kind of things, and then mapping out the priorities and then seeing, how quickly can the work go? It's difficult. It does take time. But if you have that kind of long range plan, I think it helps.
For sure. Now, we know structure kind of went out the door last year, completely. Everything was it's just like one day you wake up in the morning and you're like, wait, the world is in chaos, everything's burning, what's happening, right? And I think we all kind of went through this sort of same motions and emotions through last year, and we're still are. And with that curriculum, there was a big impact in it because the structure around it, it changed. Kathy, you had mentioned, you structured curriculum around with a curriculum council. I would love to maybe hear, Mike, your thoughts on how your school kind of went around the structure of curriculum mapping when you faced sort of this turmoil, how that structure kind of evolved as well.
I think that the fact that we knew that there were gaps and that there were holes was even more important to us last year, knowing that we needed to be able to easily pinpoint what kids would need or what they weren't getting. When we initially structured our curriculum groups, we didn't have the financial capability to pay them for that work. And so we as building leaders kind of tried to identify people that believed in the work that we were doing. Because we're so small, we have some of those big fish in the small pond, so to speak, that didn't necessarily want to do the work at first, but then they were really worried about what everybody else was doing, because they thought, if I'm responsible then for what they're doing. And so then that's kind of how we pulled people in and got them to be a part of it. Not necessarily because they were there for the right reasons, but they were there to protect what they thought, was important to them. So that's underhanded, but that's what you have to do when you don't have any resources. You have to say, look, if you don't believe that this is important, we're going to find somebody here that does. And so basically, we just curriculum shamed everybody into getting on board. So that's kind of how we attack that.
Gotcha. Okay. Tiffany, did you curriculum shame anybody to join the curriculum projects at your school, or how did that sort of go?
So in a similar manner, we are very small. So I still am in the classroom, and I'm also working on our curriculum development stuff on our campus. Some people, I guess, Michael, I could say there's some people that voiced that they either didn't get why we were doing it or they didn't see the importance of it. But those were far and few between compared to the people who, once you shared information about what this means, they got on board with it. And the ones that were least enthused about it, I made sure to tell them, like, I'm here to help. If you have any questions, I think in half of those people, it was because it was fear of the unknown in some ways. They thought that we were, or that I was, since I'm a peer to them as well, that I was going to be looking in depth at their curriculum and how they teach. And I made it clear, I'm not an instructional coach. I'm just here to help outline what it is that you do well at our campus. And so I think that cooled a lot of people's heads with it a little bit. But I think I'm answering the question about structuring, right, Shen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you have any specifics around, who was involved, how many teachers kind of got together, maybe you did some PLCs, you did some PD training, how did that all sort of look like within your school?
So what we did is last summer during quarantine, I was allowed to go on campus, and that's where it was great because nobody's around. But that's where we listed out with administrators all of the curriculum maps that we would need, who already kind of had one, who in some cases didn't have one at all. And we listed out every single map. So we came up to about 155 that we're going to need to be created within Chalk at least. And then what we did is we decided with administrators what that template was going to look like. The beautiful thing about Chalk is that you can customize it to whatever your needs are. We were a fan of the backwards design, specifically for our campus. And so I structured that curriculum map template as close as I could to a backwards design template without confusing everybody on our campus who isn't curriculum minded. So we agreed on that between administrators and myself, and we published that. And we created a team of campus auditors. So not any official title or outside source that came to audit, but they were between administrators. Our admissions coordinator was on it. Our dean of students was on that team of 9 people. And what we did for accountability was we would have monthly check-ins or monthly audits, and they would check in on maps that they were responsible for. So we divided up the 155 between them, and they were checking those so that teachers could get feedback on what they were doing well, what pieces they maybe needed to add. And then that's basically how we've structured our first year. The one thing that we did make sure to do, and this was Chalk's recommendation as well, was to think about doing it in digestible chunks. It can seem like the elephant that you're trying to all tackle at the same time. So our curriculum map, a unit, had 6 components to it between standards, essential questions. And so what we decided was let's have 3 sections be mandatory this first year. Teachers were more than welcome to put more into it, but let's have those 3 this first year. And then this upcoming school year, we'll do the other 3. And then now in the 3rd year of Chalk, we can now start to look at everything that has been built out. So that has been helpful.
We've done a lot of other work as well, very similar to what you were discussing, Tiffany. Our group, because it was new last year, we were able to come in for the most part. Just because our students just need resources, so we were always open to make sure kids could come and go as they needed to pick materials up while we were out. But during that time, we were able to kind of like take a look and take stock of the things that worked in our prior platform and things that could really use tweaking. In terms of our lesson plan, our structure has always been very closely modeled to the evaluation instrument. So we would use the Danielson domain 1, and we would we picked 3 things off of it. It was 1C, 1A, 1C, I think it's 1E or 1F. So basically, what am I teaching? How am I going to teach it? How do I know the kids learned it? So that was the essential base of where we were. And then with the COVID restrictions and then things coming in, we had to include, as a mandate from the state, from our authorizer, we had to include, well, now what does that look like? Asynchronous, synchronous, etc. So we had to include that into the procedural part of that. So that was the 1E section. And so that became part of our template. And then from the unit plan, we just try to make it as accessible as possible so that a teacher would have that template plan, but then be able to go in and then copy and paste the unit content that matched what they were doing for that day. And then we would sit and we would do basically reviews. And so the process for our schools is that we would essentially, because we're in cohorts, so our students come in every other week and they are interning on the alternate week. So a teacher actually really teaches their content twice, for a week A and a week B. And so we get a lot of time to do a lot of revision work and see how things are going and what needs to be changed. And so part of that goes right into the planning, and being able to leave comments directly into the lesson plan on the platform is so huge, because then I can leave a comment for a teacher and then they can share it with their partner in the department. And because we're departments across schools, they can share across schools really easily and share resources and materials right from the unit that worked and didn't, and be able to transfer that and make the changes for the B week upcoming. So it's been super successful in that way.
And I would just add to that, that I think that you have to see this as embedded. To be able to, for this to be successful, the work has to be embedded into the day, into what you're doing. So I got chalk, the maps are ready to go. And then I'm like, okay, where do I start? I found that working with small teams, again, using the data, saying which curriculum needs to be updated first, and taking a team. And much like Michael said, if everybody is going to be a part of it, they're going to be a lot more invested. So not excluding, but taking a team of folks and utilizing time that you have in your school year. I was able to structure that for in-service professional development days and really devote time with teams, show them how to use chalk, and then do all of the PD that we talked about before we actually started the rating work. And I honestly found that if I devoted some time to that with folks, normally within 4 to 6 days, truly and honestly, teams could have a great deal of work done and be very close to having their maps done, if you really gave them the time and the structure and the support to do that. And what that did was also then build capacity. So now as we move along, and when I left Mifflin County, you know, we had like 195 maps in chalk. So there were lots of teachers who knew how to interact and write curriculum. I'm starting over again. So that's my approach. This summer, I have a group of English teachers who need to do some work. I have a business department that needs to do some work. So I'm going to kind of bring those two groups in and kind of get them started as kind of my foundational group that are going to kind of lead the way for me.
Amazing. 195 maps. Wow. Just, I don't know for the attendees, I don't know if you have those many maps mapped out, but that definitely is quite a number. When it comes to curriculum mapping, we know there's a lot of challenges, but there are also solutions to some of those challenges. I know, Kathy, you face quite a kind of, you know, similar challenges I think a lot of schools would face. How did you go about approaching some of them and solving some of them possibly?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is that just trying to get everyone to buy in and create a sense of ownership over this curriculum. And so one structure that we've been able to put in place, we call it a core curriculum for diverse learners. So in addition to our curriculum teams that work on chalk and the development of the written curriculum, then after they do their work, a team of EL and special ed teachers get together and they look at the written curriculum and make adaptations or modifications so that all students can easily access the written curriculum. And chalk has been very helpful in helping to highlight the progressions and the standards to help and support the work of our EL and special ed teachers. I think, you know, we've mentioned this earlier, you know, time is always a challenge. Having that time to devote to this work, I think is really, really important. And so, you know, having dedicated time either through after school work, but that could be, you know, challenging too, because people are tired after school. We have found that working right after school closes during the summer for that first week has been really helpful in getting a lot of our curriculum work done. Another challenge is that, you know, we have, we're participating in an equity audit this year. We've partnered with an outside company, and some of the initial feedback from this equity audit is that we need to do a lot of work with making certain that our curriculum is culturally responsive. And so that's going to be another part of our curriculum work moving forward, and making sure that we have culturally responsive materials, but also that we are teaching in a culturally responsive manner. So those are just some of the challenges facing District 123.
So Kathy, that's fantastic. Equity audit. I'm not sure if I know the amount of work that sort of goes into it. Maybe, you know, that's something I've heard for the first time ever. Could you share a little bit more about what an equity audit is and why your district sort of decided to sort of approach it in that manner?
Well, it was part of one of our goals of our strategic plan that we developed a couple of years ago. And so we decided to partner with this outside company. And what they did this year is they spent the majority of time conducting focus group discussions with not only students and teachers, but also parents and paraprofessionals and administrators and school board members. And so we each had the opportunity to participate in homogeneous focus groups. And then, as I said, the initial results and feedback are just coming out. We had a committee of the whole board presentation, just about a couple of weeks ago, where it was very, very powerful. It was the first time I had the opportunity, or any of us besides the superintendent, to really hear some of the feedback. And the way they structured the feedback was they took excerpts from actual comments made by each of our different stakeholder groups by ethnicity. And it was sobering and humbling, very humbling to hear out of the mouths of students or parents about how they felt about, just different issues related to not just curriculum, but equity, diversity, etc. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, but we believe that it's the right work. And so we're looking forward to this next phase of the journey.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. There's a lot of work that I think not just, educational organizations, but most companies as well have to kind of go through that. Going back to sort of the question around challenges with curriculum projects, I know, Tiffany and Mike, you both had unique sort of set of problems when you both approached it within your schools. Maybe we'll start with Mike first. What were some challenges that you faced and some of those solutions to those challenges?
The first challenge that we faced was essentially we hadn't looked at curriculum in 10 years prior to the start of this process. The second challenge we had was what tool was out there. Obviously, we decided that it was chalk, but what was going to help us do this process as quickly and efficiently as possible with the limited resources that we had in place. And then how were we going to get people to participate outside the contractual day in order to get this done? And so we had to get creative with that. I put it in the chat. We worked with, we awarded continuing ed hours. We let people trade off professional development days. We threw them any bone possible that we could, as long as it wasn't $1, because we don't have $1 to spend. And you at Chalk know you're getting no money from us, because I begged, borrowed, and pleaded with Cedric to get the cheapest that I could get, just because it's so important and we weren't doing it. And then the biggest thing was we did all of this work and then we weren't sure what to do with it, because it wasn't ingrained in our culture. It's not ingrained in our day-to-day. And so how do you get people then to use this as part of their planning and instruction? And so it was just a total cultural shift in the way that we did business.
Tiffany, was it similar to the way that you approached it and the challenges possibly you faced?
Prior to Chalk, we had similar challenges on our campus, like we've said, where either curriculum didn't exist or it was in a binder somewhere collecting dust. I totally agree with Lisa and Jennifer that if it's printed, it's almost dead, which sounds strange that you would have a hard copy and it goes nowhere, but it happens. It's crazy. Our biggest challenge, like Michael, was kind of where to begin, where we found Chalk. Chalk was also very helpful with online guides to help you get started. I studied those from the first letter to the last letter just to see how it would help our campus. And so you guys had different methods for using chalk. You could diary map, you could do projected mapping, and that's how we settled on, let's go ahead and do diary mapping for this first year. So that was one challenge. Another challenge that we had on our campus was lesson plans. We have 3 division heads. So there's an early childhood head, a lower school head, and a middle school head. And they were getting lesson plans in hard copy, in an email, in a scan, and they were everywhere. So what was a challenge before we got chalk, and now it's just coming to a head. We also adopted Planboard on our campus. So now we're really excited that we're in year 1 of getting our diary maps done, and we have already been using Planboard. So in the coming years, those 2 will be able to link up. And that's where I think fireworks will go off, because now your instruction has to be tied to the curriculum because they both live in the same place. And there's a really nice feature in chalk where you can link the unit of content that you're teaching with. So that's what we're going to be looking for from our campus. So kind of the same vibe that Michael said. I'm sure some of our teachers are a little intimidated by that, but at the end it benefits our students, and that's our ultimate goal in education. So
that is very, very true. I might get, if curriculum is printed, it's dead printed on our chalk shirts moving forward. So, and maybe sent out to all the panelists here as well. So look out for that. You know, Tiffany, I think you're really kind of hitting the spot that all the things that we do around curriculum mapping, we're doing it for our students, we're doing it for our kids, and to just have them be more successful in their own futures. You know, I know, Jennifer, you've worked on so many different curriculum projects in different schools. How can a curriculum project be successful? And I think I'm going to open up starting with Jennifer, but this is really for the entire panel. How can a curriculum project be successful at a school, and what really defines a success? Because success metrics, you know, they can range, but for your specific district, how do you define that?
Well, I think, schools are kind of slow to change. And so I think it starts with really reimagining the work. We're creatures of habit, and so we continue to do what we've always done. And so when I went to my first district from another district, I started asking, well, why and how do we? Well, this is what we've always done. This is what we have. And so I think it really comes around kind of reimagining that work. And now is a perfect time to do that, because what is normal anymore? So it's a good time to do that. I think absolutely we've all talked about, mission and vision, and making that part of the plan. Listening to your stakeholders. I have gotten into curriculum writing with teams, and it's not gone well. They weren't able to work together. We're having challenges as a work group. And so we had to take pause and think about ways to assist them, and to back off of that, and to do some other things. Data is critical. Using your data, and everyone's district is going to look different. What your needs would be may not be what the needs are. When I came to Hollidaysburg, one of the things that, my department heads in science said was, we're really struggling because of the structure of our buildings and how we teach science across our grade levels. And we really need there to be some vertical alignment. So, that piqued my ears to say, this is a team who's gonna need me pretty early on. I think the last thing is just avoiding that shiny object that we always have in education, the greatest and latest thing that comes down, and it distracts our work. When in reality, our biggest work that we need to do in districts are develop high quality curricular maps that we can use to instruct students. So that's the most important work that we do.
For sure. No, that's something I think I definitely agree with. Maybe, Kathy, you're kind of unmuted. Do you have anything to add to that?
I was going to say that one of the ways that I have gauged success of the work that we've done with chalk is when I hear new staff members say how much they appreciate everything that's available for them on chalk when they enter the district, because they really feel comfortable that they know where it is, the expectations for where they're heading with their students by the time they complete the year. And they just like the roadmap that's laid out for them and organized in a way that's really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and anyone else kind of have anything to add, or maybe we can go to the Q&A next.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that the accessibility for my staff has been the most important. So we've been using Planboard, and we have, you know, our core maps done and connected. And so because they can just go right online, they can go on their phone, you know, they can share documents, they can do all this work and make changes, and also think about different ways that their courses fit into the big picture. Just really lends itself to having some like really rich conversations with our teams as we discuss that, and we talk about assessment in kids throughout the year. So having that as sort of like the root has really been very successful for us.
I'm glad to hear that. What we'll do now is maybe take a couple of seconds to look at the Q&A. We have a couple of questions, but if you do have a you know, specific question for any of the panelists or for all of them, please you know, quickly type that into the Q&A. One question I'll kind of start off with. This is not really specific to anybody, and maybe whoever wants to answer this can. I've seen Michael has already kind of answered this question, but this is from Amar, and he's asking, what are the evidence that you use in socioeconomic, socio-technical trends that you look at when you want to update but not revise the curriculum? And how do you make sure that the update serves your unique needs at your school?
I can help answer a little bit of that. Our campus is going to be looking, I actually present on Friday to our administrators, so I'm anxious to see what their feedback is. But I took a training last week with a curriculum solutions group, and they had a formula that was called years to parity, so years to equalness. And I thought that was really interesting because you could take two demographics and you could so you could do like Hispanic student demographic scores over, you had to at least have 3 to 5 years of data. And then you could compare it to non-Hispanic students and how they're performing. And then the formula would give you years to parity. So if you did not intervene with your curriculum or your instruction at all, that would be how many years to close that gap between those two constituents, or well, student demographic groups, I should really say. So I'm really excited for that, because that's how we're going to start answering some questions and discovering about our student body where diversity, equity, inclusion lie when it comes to curriculum. How we can help support our students that we may not realize that we're not reaching instructionally and through the resources that we have on our campus.
And I would just add to that, one of my districts, the elementary buildings, one in particular had a very high poverty level compared to the others. And what we were noticing from what would be kind of our Dibbles data or those indicators of early reading, very difficult to move students. We were losing students, particularly in that building. And so we needed to take a deep dive about why was that and what kind of things were we doing in that building. And it ended up that we felt like we needed more direct instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics and vocabulary, because the students entering into our school were coming in with a lot lower oral language skills and phonemic awareness. So the curriculum maps were actually adapted for kindergarten, first and second grade in that particular building for specifically that. The other buildings' data didn't show that need, and they were doing fine with the curriculum that they had. So it did allow us to adapt to a specific building need that had differing needs within the district as well.
I think having the flexibility to be able to adapt is really important across the board, like whoever you're serving. You know, between our two schools, we're very high poverty. It's over 88% in both buildings. But the Brooklyn building has a mostly African-American population, whereas in our Queens building, it's largely Asian and Pacific American. And so we have been able to shift a lot of our curriculum to make sure that we're including resources that address both populations, and that they're being exposed to people, to authors, to artists that are also reflective of them. And we've also been very conscious of that in our staffing as well, to make sure that everyone has like a champion, has a person that they can go to that looks like them, and has had similar experiences, and that has been extremely important for us in the relationship building part too.
Shin, I think I can maybe help answer, and the other panelists as well. There was a question from Pauline Sophia Ellis about how to use the universal design for learning and mapping. I'm not super familiar if that's a specific type of curriculum mapping that she's looking at, but what I was going to say was that Chalk, you can customize what your curriculum map looks like. So if you're trying to follow a certain design, or if you're trying to follow a certain template or style, then you can use Chalk, and it's 100% customizable. Also, with somebody who put in the chat, adding intent, you could add in a section within your curriculum map if the standards is not enough and they want you to explicitly state for each unit what your intent is for that. You can add a box, and you can provide that.
Fantastic. So again, if anybody has any other questions, maybe they want to answer. I think there's one, maybe a lot of you have already sort of gone through some of the strategies that you've implemented at your school. But I think one of the questions we have is specifically around maybe one subject area. Could you talk a little bit about one of the strategies that you took forward in your curriculum in a specific subject level, maybe the lowest performing grade level or lowest performing in terms of test scores? Is there anything that maybe we could hear a little bit about that before we wrap up here?
What I did, like for example, we picked grade level teams. And so we started with ELA, not because our ELA scores were any worse than other score that we had, but because our resource was going to expire. And so that's just kind of where we were at. We knew we had to make an investment in a new resource, possibly. And so they didn't necessarily recognize the value in writing the curriculum, but they thought, well, at the end of this tunnel is I'm going to get a new resource. And so it was kind of like dangling the carrot, and that's terrible, but that's what we did. We said we have this limited amount of money, and we're going to spend it, on this resource in this subject area. And if you want to be on board and make a decision about what that resource is going to look like, then you have to be part of putting a well-developed map in place in order to do that.
When I think about our science curriculum, especially at the middle school level, traditionally it was taught in a very siloed manner. For example, the 6th grade was going to teach physical science, and then 7th grade biology, etc. And so when the next generation science standards came about, and we discussed science at the Curriculum Council, there wasn't a real need expressed by the science teachers at the middle school. No, we're good. We're all good. But our science curriculum facilitator actually wrote a grant that enabled us to partner with the University of Illinois in Chicago. And we spent a year working with the middle school science teachers through that grant, helping them to really understand the 3-dimensional aspect of NGSS. And I think that was really critical to help them understand that, maybe they're not all as good as they thought they were. And so one of the strategies from the U of I was to ask the teachers to develop a unit. And once the teachers understood the amount of work that went into really developing an NGSS aligned unit, I think that was a very powerful tool that actually I'm using right now with our K-8 social studies team to have them really go through the process of developing a unit, because then it really highlights the critical components of that set of standards.
Fantastic. I know we're close to our time here. Any other last sort of thoughts on curriculum mapping, maybe some best advice or tips for our attendees, maybe that are just starting curriculum at their schools or lesson planning?
It's a never-ending process, right? You got to dive into it and know that it's, as a change project, that it's going to be constantly tweaked and there's no be all end all and there's always room for improvement. And if we kind of look at it that way, then you can check a lot of ego at the door because you know that there's going to be something that's external of you that will require a change. And just that alone will be able to foster very healthy conversations around mapping.
For sure. Mike, sorry, you had something to add as well?
I think somebody in the Q&A asked about whether the maps could be downloaded or not. Our LMS is PowerSchool, which is offered by Pearson, and they have a curriculum mapping thing. And what we found was Chalk was user-friendly. And so at some point down the road, we might be able to break camp with Chalk. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that was one of the appeals, that they said that, yes, you can make these maps, and then, yes, they can go into your LMS. And so that was appealing to the people holding the purse strings above me.
Awesome. Maybe Kathy, Jennifer, Tiffany, if you have any sort of advice for those that are starting curriculum sometime soon. I know a lot of people are in that boat.
I would say just very quickly, it's the right work, and have that in place before you even consider going to a standards-based grading report card.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Lisa said it's messy work. You got to jump in. I think that we talked about really strategically thinking this through and bringing in partners to the work. Principals are very busy at the building level. They have a lot to do. I've been a building level principal, but they have to be partners in the work. And so I think, to think about your district teams, whatever those admin teams are, and really starting there potentially to get your admin team understanding and on board if they're not all there. And then that work can then transfer over to the staff, because once you create these curriculum maps and you're trying to get high quality instruction, the administrators are the ones observing and seeing if the curriculum work is being effective. So really everybody has to have that understanding.
All I was going to add, Shin, was that there's going to be highs and lows for sure. But if you just keep your eye on the prize, which is your students, and know that all of this hard, messy, rewarding, everything in between those emotions is ultimately for them, I think that helps everybody power on.
For sure. That is a wonderful sort of note to end on. Curriculum is a roller coaster ride. So everybody buckle in. Thank you all to the panelists that were able to kind of spend the last hour kind of teaching us their strategies and best case practices. Thank you to the attendees for taking the time out of their day to, attend. If you have any specific questions for any of these attendees, please reach out to info@chalk.com and we'll be able to kind of connect you all with them. That is really it from our end. Please, let us know your thoughts about this webinar, reach out to us. And we're just really thankful that the panelists could spend such an incredible amount of time and share all their learnings with us. And I just want to say to all the panelists and as well as the attendees, your curriculum projects, I know they're going to be as successful as you make them, and your roller coaster ride is going to be crazy fun. Probably as fun as the Disney World once that opens. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you to the panelists. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end off this sort of panel and have a great rest of your night. Bye.